One of the most critical things about managing a physical products business or brand with inventory, and frankly one that people truly underappreciate the value in, is demand planning. And what demand planning really is it's predicting how much inventory you need based on sales velocity, and then ensuring some operational structures and sophistication and ordering such so you always keep enough inventory to match that sales demand. But you want to keep the right amount of inventory. So you don't want to have too much where it strains your working capital and cash, but you don't want to have too little to where you stock out and leave a significant amount of money on the table. So the purpose of this video is really just to understand how the end-to-end supply chain works, from raw materials all the way through to selling to end customers, and how we can optimally plan and order inventory to maximize sales and cash flow without stocking out. Okay, so let's start by mapping out what an end-to-end supply chain looks like. So first of all, you've got all of these raw materials that are going to make up your product. Those raw materials are then going to go into producing end product. Then from there, your product probably needs to be inspected and just make sure that that's all good to go. It then needs to be transported to port. It then needs to be shipped, which is typically going to be via ocean. Once in the destination country, it needs to be trucked or railed to a warehouse. Then in the case of an Amazon business, it goes to an Amazon warehouse. And then finally, if somebody buys it, ideally you hope somebody buys it, it's going to go to an end customer. So here's the key thing, right? The raw materials take a certain number of days, production takes a certain number of days, inspection takes a certain number of days, port time, shipping and freight, whether it's air or ocean, trucking it in the destination country, getting it into Amazon, and then there's a certain time between when it's in Amazon to when a customer buys it. And it's really these days that are going to contribute to how much we actually need to keep on hand, keeping in mind that there's a certain amount of sales that are taking place during this time. So what we need to factor in when we're demand planning and figuring out what inventory we need to keep in, we need to understand what the sales velocity is, and this is where you're trying to predict the future, which due to seasonality and changes in organic rank and all these things can be a little bit difficult. And then we're trying to really calculate the number of days and the lead time that it takes the factory to make the goods, keeping in mind that you might have here long lead time parts that may change your lead time over time. We need to figure out how many days it's going to take to actually get onto a boat by factoring in the inspection and port time. We need to figure out how long it's going to take to ship typically, and then how long this actual time frame once it lands in the destination country does it take to actually get transported ultimately into an Amazon warehouse. So we calculate the number of days, we figure out what our daily sales velocity is, and that's going to give us an understanding as to what our inventory position needs to be. And there's some strategies we can think about to how best manage this, mitigate against stockouts, and optimize working capital. So to effectively understand and predict the inventory position that we need, there's a couple of elements that we really need to harness and understand in our demand planning structure. The first is going to be our sales velocity. More specifically, our sales per day. The next thing we need to understand is basically the production time, or the lead time that it's going to take to actually produce our product. And this is going to be in days. The next is our transit time to the actual destination country. That's also going to be in days. Next is actually getting it checked into an Amazon warehouse for sale. That's going to be days as well. So being able to predict the sales per day figure and really accounting for what we think is going to happen in the future, especially if it's going to increase or decrease based on seasonality. Then we have a total lead time basically from when we place an order to when it's anticipated to arrive in Amazon through these three categories. So then the math's pretty simple, right? It's basically the sales velocity number per day must be equal to the production time plus the transit plus the check-in time to Amazon. And if you got all of this equation perfect all the time, you would always have just the right amount of inventory to meet demand. But as we know, the world doesn't work in perfection. In fact, there's a lot of room for error here. There's a lot of variables that are almost impossible to predict. You know, your sales could be either higher or lower than anticipated. You could have production time that takes longer. Your transit time could take longer, and Amazon could take longer to check in. So there's a lot of variability here. So another thing that we need to get comfortable with from a risk standpoint as well as a cash flow standpoint is what is the actual safety stock days that we want to have our product. And this basically, it helps us cover if the sales are off, if production's off for timing, if it takes us longer, or if Amazon takes a little bit longer. So that buffer stock helps us, manage this imperfection, high or low. And we want basically this amount to be enough so that it covers our bases so we don't stock out, but we also don't want to have like 7 months of inventory because the turning of inventory is critically important. So in the next video, we're going to go over a simple tool that you can leverage at the SKU level to help predict and map this out for your business.